Hey everyone, Tom here at Cerulean Bay. And today, for this week's episode, what I would like to get into is inspiration. And with that, I mean getting into what really is the inspiration behind your idea for tropical design. I thought a great way to kick this off would be for me to just kind of tell my story, what got me going with inspiration, what first inspired me in the beginning years ago that has led up to where things are today. Because years ago, and we're talking going way back here, I could take you back to when I was a kid and when I started noticing things that just really spoke to me in nature and growing up in San Diego and what it was that really made me feel like, wow, this is a very nice place to live. But how could it be even better? Because I had heard about tropical places. And I remember my mom telling me as a kid that, well, San Diego is a subtropical climate. It's not real tropical. It's not going to be sunny and hot year round. And you don't have the coconut palm trees and things like that. And I just remember being fascinated by the concept of tropical environments at an early age, even though I had never lived in one. San Diego was as close as I got. And, to those who aren't familiar, as wonderful as the climate is in Southern California, it's not true tropical. They have a lot of cloudy, cool weather at different parts of the year too, which does not exist in the tropics. But I thought that by sharing what really inspired me from the get-go, and again, just by telling my story here, would help to get you guys thinking, because what I'd love to do is find out what you think. What is it that inspires you? What story do you have to share that explains your love for the tropics and tropical designs and whatever it is about these beautiful places that speaks to you, maybe that you connect with at home through interior styling or exterior styling? I think it would just be wonderful to know that. So yeah, I'm going to get into what inspires me, and hopefully that will help to uncover what inspires you. So for those of you who may not know, I was born and raised in San Diego, and it is a place that is easy to take for granted. I think probably like pretty much anywhere when you're just in the daily routine of life. And as a kid, you're going to school, and then you're just doing the things that you do as you get started with working and moving on through life, whether you choose to stay there or then you end up living in different places like I did. But I remember as a kid in San Diego, I was just never a fan of the cloudy, cool weather. And I grew up pretty much in the central part of town there, very close to where the San Diego Stadium was anyways, up on the north side there. But there are periods of the year where it is cloudy and overcast. And I just remembered not liking to put a jacket on when I was a kid, and my dad always making me put a jacket on because you're going to get cold and that's how you're going to get sick. And I just thought, you know what? I want to live in a warm place where that's not a concern. So I remember thinking way back to that at 7, 8, 9 years old. And for those of you who do know Southern California and you've heard the terms May gray and June gloom, and that just shows you that there are periods of the year where it's not all that warm and sunny at the beach. Now, you move further inland, San Diego and even in LA for the most part, the further you get from the coast, just by going a few miles inland, the cloud deck doesn't reach as far east and the temperatures are warmer. You've got sunnier skies. Now, that means cooler nights too, usually for most of the year. But I remember after having moved around and then getting married and moving back to San Diego, living in East County, for those of you who are familiar with it, that is the El Cajon, Santee, Lakeside area. We bought our first house in Lakeside, and I absolutely loved it. It was inland, it was hot, 80s and 90s in the summer. We had a pool, and I was a realtor at the time, and the wonderful little brokerage that I worked with was located in Solana Beach, right on the coast. And I just remember so many times when it was sunny and bright in the morning in Lakeside, and then I would have to go down to the office either for a meeting or just along the coast there to go show property, and you literally had to take a light jacket with you because you get up over the hill and then get down into San Diego there, and it was cloudy and overcast and in the 60s, and I didn't miss that at all. So living in Lakeside was also where I discovered that, yes, even in San Diego County, plants can freeze. Growing up, there were no freezes where I grew up in the Serra Mesa area. But when you get to a certain point going eastbound, that is where the temperatures drop at night. And I had planted a big, beautiful bougainvillea in the backyard. My neighbors had these big king palms that had made it for a number of years, and they were quite large. And of course, the first winter we were there, my bougainvillea froze. It actually died. And the neighbors had to cut back their king palms all the way just to the trunk in the hopes that those would survive. And after a couple of years, they just never really came back like they did. So the guys ended up moving them out of there. But yeah, there are certain tropicals then the further you get away from the coast, they don't grow. So that just goes to show you that even in a place like San Diego County, you can have weather extremes where some of those sensitive tropicals just don't make it. And yeah, it was very frustrating. But, with that first house, that's where I was able to start looking indoors as well. Because up until that point, I had just really been into tropical plants outside and landscaping and stuff. And now that I had a house, I wanted to bring that in. And that's where I started experimenting with different textures on the wall by using simple things like drywall mud or joint compound that you can get at your home improvement store, and trying to do things that were kind of trendy back in the 90s, like sponging, that kind of sponge painting technique, and using a rag with really watered down diluted paint to create a watercolor effect. That's actually really cool. And we didn't really have a lot of money for new furniture back then, being newly married, and then with our first son being born, and you know how it is, it's you got to pay the bills. But we were out there looking, just one day, maybe we could afford this or that. And that's where I really discovered that Edna and I had that shared love for tropical looking furniture, the dark woods, colors kind of trending on the bolder side, and really trying to bring the outdoors in. Our backyard there had been beautifully landscaped by the previous owners, and I kind of added my touches to it. And the front yard was really nice too. So by seeing the view that we had from our windows, it was just kind of that natural inclination to bring things indoors. And so that's where it really started for me. But taking you back, even before that, I would have to say my first exposure to really far off places happened when I was living in Switzerland, and this is going back to the late 80s, early 90s. And my very first job there was with Air Madagascar, and they shared an office with Air Mauritius in Geneva. So I was in Geneva for about a year. Now, Switzerland obviously is not a tropical place. It's beautiful in the summertime, but it is cold and cloudy and wet in the winter, and definitely not for me. But working for these airlines was actually really nice. And it was there that I got my first exposure to what these tropical places were about. Now, I didn't actually get to go because I was too new to the staff. And if there were any necessary trips, it was always the senior people that got to go. But that's where I was introduced, just through the information we had in the office, the staff that I worked with, that coming from California, there are other places on this planet other than Hawaii and, maybe the shorelines of Mexico and places like this, which are definitely more local, and those are the ones you always hear about growing up. But I was being introduced to countries I had maybe only heard about, but I really couldn't pick them out on a map, and I didn't know anything about them. So I absolutely loved that introduction to it because it told me there's a whole lot more to this world than just Southern California and places like Mexico. So after leaving Air Madagascar, I had to take a position in Zurich. And that's where I started working for TWA and then for Pan Am. And it was really at Pan Am I got even more exposure to new tropical places in this world. Some I had never even heard of, like the Maldive Islands, which I discovered are very popular among the Europeans because geographically it is closer. It's still a trip to make on a plane, but that part of the world knows the Maldives. And many of the people I had gotten to know in Switzerland were very into taking their annual vacations, and some of them were very into diving and sailing and things like this. And so the Maldives was a place where people at Pan Am were going, and I didn't get the chance to go because my time there was not that long. And, being only in my 20s at the time, money was tight. So I took in everything I could with pictures that people brought back, books that I could find about these places just to see what they looked like and learn more about their cultures and who lived there. This is where I also learned a lot more about Bali, because in the office area at the airport, there were these long hallways where the airlines had their offices, and this is where the ticket counter staff would go, or the gate agents in between flights. This was where you had your desk. And right across from us at Pan Am was Garuda, which is the national airline of Indonesia. And at the time, they had a nonstop flight that went from Zurich to Bali. And it was a flight I always wanted to take, but it was always full. You could never get on their standby. And I just thought, just with the posters they had in the office and the people I got to meet who were just wonderful, lovely people, what they would tell you about a place like Bali, it was just magical. And I thought, one day I have to get there. So as I continued on working for Pan Am, I got my first real personal taste of the tropics, believe it or not, in Miami. At that time I was working for Pan Am, I was working a lot in the lost luggage area. And at the hub at JFK in New York, that was like where the global lost luggage center was. But at the time, they were thinking of moving it to Miami, and I don't know the reason why. But I was asked to fly down to Miami to go meet the staff there, and we would literally go look for lost bags and things like this. Well, I had never been to Florida. And when I got down to Miami, this was in 1990, it was one of the biggest treats of my life, especially living in Zurich. It was just as different as day and night. And I remember getting my rental car there and driving through Coral Gables. I had a little motel in that area, and I just felt like I was in heaven. I just felt like it was paradise. Miami was just the most beautiful place I had ever seen in the entire world. And I grew up in a very close family, and I was very close to my parents. And whenever I would travel or be in a different place, I would always make it a point to call my parents. And they're like, you can go ahead, find a payphone, call, collect. And so I did. I remember being at a little 7-Eleven in Coral Gables, and I found a payphone. I called my dad, told him where I was, and I said, I've never been here before, but this place feels like home. It is just absolutely beautiful, and I just had every positive vibe about it. I was just fascinated by it, and I actually had a few days to myself where I could go and just travel around, and so I did. I just went and explored Miami, went out to Miami Beach, drove down to Key Largo, and was just in heaven. And this, again, was 1990. To this day, it's still my favorite place in the U.S. I introduced my wife to that area back in 2008. I think that was her first time going down there. And she had never been there, absolutely loved it. And that's just one of the most wonderful things is when you are lucky enough to be married to somebody where you just have so much in common. And we have so many of the same interests and we like so many of the same things. I don't mind the heat and humidity. Here in Houston, it gets really hot sometimes. And I will admit it's not weather that you want to get out and work in, like in your garden, or you don't want to be doing just any kind of hard labor outside when it's brutally hot and humid. And in Miami, it's the same way. It gets pretty hot and humid down there. But when I say I love the heat and humidity, it's just for your general everyday living. I'm a shorts and t-shirts kind of guy. I can wear flip-flops year round. I have no use for cold weather. There's nothing wrong with people who love skiing and the whole mountain environment and love the winter sports. And that's great. Fly out there during the winter and enjoy that. But I could never live in those climates. And that's what I discovered in Switzerland was in both Geneva and Zurich, Geneva being a very windy place too. It's the everyday living. It's having to get up and go to work every day. It's living in the cold. It's living with that wind where it's just wet and it's in the low to mid 30s and just day in and day out. And you can go long stretches without seeing the sun over there. For the most part, it's pretty much November until March. You don't really see a lot of the sun. I can't do that. That's not me. When I was really missing the sun and at least some blue skies, I would take the train from Zurich to Milan. It was a 6-hour train ride. I would get a cheap little hotel by the train station and I would just go hang out there. And it was cold. I mean, it wasn't as cold as Zurich, but it wasn't shorts weather, but it was sunny. The skies were blue. People were out laughing and talking. I didn't speak Italian back then. I still don't today, but I absolutely loved Milan. It helped me out several times when I was there, when I just needed to see the sun and the blue skies. And they do have palm trees there, and it was just wonderful. So being able to spend a week in Miami back then, that really confirmed to me what it was. And I was able on the flight back to Switzerland to think, what is it about this place that made me feel the way it did? And I just realized it was the plants, the tropical plants. It was the colors from the flowers to the way the homes were painted to just the overall beauty of the place. And then, yes, it was warm. It was humid. I remember it was in the month of April, so it wasn't blazing hot yet in the summer, but it was warm. It was balmy. It was just so inviting. I remember going to Miami Beach and just standing there thinking, this is so much nicer than San Diego. And I do. I prefer the beaches of South Florida over San Diego. I know some people think I'm crazy, but beauty wise, Southern California, yeah, it's pretty tough to beat with the geography and just the scenery, whereas South Florida is pretty flat. But I love the sand. I love the water. I just love the vibe, the atmosphere. So, yeah, my heart, my home, even though I've never lived there, is in South Florida. And I think my wife would say the same thing. So, that's where my love for all things tropical really started. And I thought, if you were to buy a house here, what would it look like? They have a lot of Spanish style older homes in Coral Gables. There's a lot of Mediterranean influence that's there. And then, of course, there's a lot of modern contemporary, a lot of newer design, but just a lot of windows, views that look out onto beautiful backyards, even if they're not big, even if they're not professionally landscaped. They're just full of palms and bamboo and just all these wonderful plants. Well, after my time in Switzerland was up, and that was back in 92, and that's a whole different story maybe for another day, I ended up living in San Francisco, not by choice. But in short, my ex-wife, who was Swiss, had chosen San Francisco, and after I just burned out on the cold weather of Europe, I thought, you know what? I just need to go back to the States. I've been here for 4 years. Let's go do 4 years in the States and then figure out where we'll go from there. And she had been to Miami before, and she really enjoyed it. She had visited some friends there, and I said, let's just move there, but it was too hot for her, too humid. She wanted to go to San Francisco because back in the 80s, the UC Berkeley extension was a very popular place for a lot of Europeans and a lot of South Americans to go to learn English. And so people spent 6 months there and traveled around California. And San Francisco at the time was just like a big theme park. I mean, to me, I knew people lived there. But coming from San Diego, your first thought is, who would live in San Francisco? It's like living in a theme park, just with the Golden Gate Bridge and all of the beautiful things that they had there. But that's what she chose. And I knew it was a cooler and cloudier climate for the most part because I had been there several times. So I did move to San Francisco in 92, and then the story changed. She ended up staying in Europe, and we won't go into all of that. But I ended up staying there for a few years and had a nice little job there, and I made a few friends, and that's actually where I met my wife, Edna, who's from Houston. She was out there too, working with Wells Fargo. We ended up at Wells Fargo together, and here we are married 31 years. But while I was living there, there were times where it was tough because it's foggy, it's cold, it's cloudy. It just is not me. And I would literally take the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, over to East Bay, like going over to Oakland or even going out to Concord, just do something to get outside because it would be in the 70s and 80s and sunny. And East Bay actually reminded me a lot of Southern California weather-wise. So that's what I would do when I was in San Francisco. If it wasn't sunny there, and many times it's not, I would just take the BART, head over to East Bay, hang out for the day, and then come back. Well, then moving on, after getting married, my love for tropical plants continued. Edna and I, we lived in San Diego. We ended up moving to LA for a job. We were living in Burbank, and we had a really cool little rental house there. And I remember helping the landlords who lived next door do some landscaping and just trying out new plants. And in the valley there in LA, it's another place where you can just grow so many different things. It does get cold at night, and they do have temperatures that touch the 30s, and we did get some frost damage here and there. But it was Burbank. It was better than Switzerland. It was better than San Francisco. So, then Eddie and I, our time in Burbank ended and moved around, came back to Houston, went back to San Diego. Well, then by the time we came back to Houston in 2002, I knew they had weather here because we had lived here for 1 year during the mid-90s and then went back to California. And during that one winter, she had some very large cactus-type plants which froze to the core. And I remember it being 19 degrees one night, and I thought, oh my God, it's Switzerland all over again here in the winter time. But, for the most part, no, that's very short-lived here in Houston. I've been here 23 years now, and winters are very, very hit or miss. They definitely do get colder, December, January, February, but there have been several winters here where the freezes are very, very light. You might get a little bit of frost, just a light little freeze warning here and there, which will damage some plants. And if you have potted plants, you bring them in, or if they're in the ground outside, you cover them up. But then you have your winters where it gets flippin' cold. If everybody remembers the big freeze back in 2021, I think it made world news. It was cold. I mean, that I had never seen in the US before. and where it went down to 11 or 12 at night for a couple nights. It was 15 during the day. It killed every non-native thing. I lost two 50-foot palm trees out back that I had to cut down. Pipes were bursting everywhere. Ours were okay because I knew how to prep and take care of this, but definitely brutal. These houses here are not built for that kind of weather. But again, once something like that happens, it comes and then it goes. It doesn't linger for weeks and months. You got to deal with a few days of it. So in Houston, it really is a lot like South Florida, 7 to 8 months out of the year, especially over the summer. The falls and the springs are beautiful here. They remind me of San Diego, actually, where the humidity drops, but it's still warm outside, but it's not oppressive. You can get outside and do your yard work and landscaping and things. Sometimes I do feel like I need to hold my breath from November to February because you never know what you're going to get each winter. And I pray my heart out that it's just going to be a mild, easy winter with no major freezes. Having said that, you would think you could grow a lot of tropicals here. And unfortunately, you can't because of winter. You can get plants that'll take off and go, but then the minute winter comes around and temperatures start dropping into the 40s and the 30s and the 20s, there you go. Some plants get killed to the ground, which means they'll grow back next year. But others are just dead. They don't come back and you're having to dig them up. And it was living here where I learned that trying to make your house look different landscaping wise doesn't really work. All you have to do is drive around your neighborhood, have a list of your favorite plants in your head or on your phone or whatever, and then go drive around your neighborhood. If you don't see them here, they don't grow here. You can bet that somebody here tried it at least once and it didn't work. And when we first moved in here, I had different plants going outside. I had tried to plant some different palms, and I had a queen palm and hibiscus and bird of paradise and things like that. I mean, bird of paradise, those grow like weeds in San Diego. And I thought surely here they would be okay. And they're kind of a hardy, tough plant if you're familiar with bird of paradise. The stalks are firm and the leaves are kind of hard and leathery, but no, they absolutely do not survive the winter here. And when it's cold like that and they get too much water, they don't flower. So I ended up pulling those out. So yes, after all of these years, other than the Mediterranean fan palms that I have in my front yard, my yard kind of looks like everybody else's. I just gave up on it because plants are so expensive. They're trucked in here from California and they're trucked in from Florida. That's where all the major growers are. And so I guess it's transportation costs. I don't know. But you live in Houston, potted plants are not cheap, whether they're indoors or outdoors. So yeah, as the years pass by, you just realize what you can and can't do. And I think growing older, you're just able to reflect more on how things make you feel. And you can sit there and study why they make you feel the way you do. Because for me, there were just a lot of times in my life where I could just look back and study and say, okay, this happened or that happened. Why did those things happen? And then take the positives out of it. I mean, life is full of good and bad and, good choices and bad choices and things like that. And the times that made me happiest were when I was in places that just were tropical or looked tropical. I just love that whole concept, that whole way of styling, just with the colors and the textures and the things that go into it. Those just speak to me. Those are my happy place. So kind of pulling all of that together, that's where I just realized that this isn't just me, obviously, that feels this way. There are millions of people that live in tropical environments that love it there. There's other millions of people who don't live in the tropics who wish they did and at some point in their lives are fortunate enough to be able to go and move to places that are tropical. And maybe for some of them, it doesn't work out. They realize maybe it's not for them and they end up going back where they're from. It's just, that's where throughout my life, I just realized that there is a connection between the tropics and all things tropical and emotional well-being. At least for me, there is. And I know I'm not the only one. So after leaving the airlines way back then and then getting into banking and then working in the corporate world year after year, that whole tropical connection with me was there that I could never really do anything with. Maybe take a little vacation here and there, but I wanted it to be a part of my life. I wanted to see it every day when I came home. I wanted to live it. If I couldn't move to it, I was going to create it here at home. And being married with 3 small boys, yeah, for me personally, leaving San Diego was a great thing. being here in Houston, yeah, it has a much more tropical vibe when you're outside, like I said, 7, 8 months out of the year. At least I have that. And then geographically, where we're located, yeah, it's a lot closer to Florida. I mean, Miami is just a quick flight away, or you have the Florida Panhandle. I mean, Pensacola is only a 9-hour drive. You can get to some pretty nice beaches, and you have all of the beauty that is Florida pretty much right next door. And that just really works for me. So as the years just flew by, raising 3 boys and being super busy, I had the chance finally to go to Fiji in 2017. We were going to go with some friends. We booked our tickets, but then our friends weren't able to go. So my wife and I, after finding out the tickets were non-refundable and we couldn't even get a flight credit for them, we just decided, let's just go. It's the honeymoon we never had. Let's just go and do it. And so through Costco Travel, which is really good, your tip for the day, if any of you are Costco members, wonderful. They can really hook you up. They helped us find an absolutely amazing adults only 5-star all-inclusive resort down on a private island, Matangi Private Island Resort, for those of you who want to know. But that's where we spent a week, and it was life-changing for me. Fiji changed my life, literally. I've always had a very entrepreneurial spirit, but was never able to do anything, was never able to take the leap, because when you're raising 3 small kids, obviously paychecks are very, very important. And even when your kids are grown, paychecks are very, very important. And I thought one day I'm hoping to have the chance to do this, because I think one of the saddest things in life is getting to an old age and then having regrets that you didn't take the chances that could have potentially spelled great happiness and satisfaction. I didn't want to have any regrets. So after Fiji, with the boys being older, continued on in oil and gas here in Houston, and then I had to take the leap. And there were a couple times I had to go back to work full time, because obviously when money starts to run out, you got to go back to work. But my wife and I, we were able to really kick things off back in 2019. And of course, that was right before COVID hit. I mean, literally months before COVID hit. And so COVID put the brakes on things for a while here for us. And once again, I had to go back to work outside. But it really is only since last year, July of last year, 2024, that I said, I'm just relaunching all of this. I've had the blog posts and the website and some parts and pieces sitting there that I never really had time to develop. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I knew there was a huge reorganization coming at my last job. And I thought, I am not sitting through another one of these where you're going to spend 6 months to a year wondering if you're going to have a job at the end of all of this again, or else getting moved into a position that you have no connection with, that you might not even be qualified for. But if you want to keep the paycheck, you have to take it. I wasn't dealing with any of that anymore. So it was Fiji that literally changed my life. And that's where Cerulean Bay was born. I remember being on that flight home and I thought, no, this is not going to be a trip that you just check off of some bucket list. I was going to turn this into something, and I didn't know what. I had always dreamt of owning an import business one day, but we never knew what we were going to import. Now we had it. It was the artwork. It was just the beautiful wood carvings and tapa bark cloth and hand-blown glass and just the things that we had seen. I thought, this is a starting point. This is what we can do. I can start to study Fiji, learn more about the culture. Of course, it's an amazingly beautiful tropical place. How can I bring Fiji into my home back in Houston? And that's where it started. And my mission was, I want to bring that feeling of a tropical escape into everyday homes for everyday people who maybe don't have a chance to go to the tropics and only dream about it. Or maybe you've been and it was a bucket list thing, and there's just been no way for you to connect that back to your home. Yeah, you've got the pictures or maybe videos that you took while you were there, but there's no reason to not actually live it at home by getting the right kind of pieces, furniture that's inspired by these places, home decor and accessories that's made in these places. Or if they're not, they are authentic pieces of artwork that represent these places. Then getting in real plant life. And if you can't do real plant life because you don't have a green thumb or you don't want to deal with real plants, or maybe you've got allergies, you get some really good fake ones in. And today there are some good fake ones out there. So once we figured out who we were going to order from and then try and resell here in the States, how are we going to do that? Should we go wholesale? that wasn't really going to work because you can't order big quantities of the same thing from these local artists. I mean, these are artists. They produce what they produce when they want to produce it. And that's it. They're inspired. This is their creativity. And they have families. They have a life outside of their hobby. Or if this is their profession that they produce these beautiful pieces, they're going to do it on their own terms, as they should. And that's not just a Fijian thing. That's just a world thing. If this is your passion and your love and you create beautiful things, you do it on your own terms. You do it when that spirit moves you and strikes and says, you know what, that creativity comes in, and then you go ahead and create that piece. So that was what I had to work with. And once we kind of got that foundation put in place, that's where I wanted to get more into the actual interior design aspect of it for people who do have the architectural capability of a particular room or maybe their whole home, and they live in a weather-friendly place. There are ways then where you can incorporate the tropics through a lot of natural light and open living spaces and things like that. But if you don't, and you live in a colder climate, or maybe you live in an apartment, there are ways to bring the tropics into those places too through good interior design, interior decorating. And that's where I really wanted to blend function with relaxation. How does your room work? What is it you do in there? And how can it create a sense of relaxation regardless of what you're doing? Whether you are actually sitting or laying down and closing your eyes, or you're at your desk like me doing this podcast and I'm surrounded by a beautiful shade of blue and I've got my plants and it's just a nice little tropical office. Whatever your lifestyle is, as long as it's one that makes you happy and it allows for some relaxation, how can you bring the tropics in there and just blend it all together? That's what I wanted to do. So after all of these years of thinking and eating and drinking and sleeping this, which is pretty much what I do 7 days a week, it's the tropics and tropical design in Cerulean Bay for me since 2019, I want to know what other people are doing. I am really curious about what inspires other people. In the traveling that my wife and I have done, other guests have been at those resorts. We've met some really cool people when we've traveled. We didn't really get to develop a close friendship. They're not people that we're in contact with today, although some of them were pretty cool, and I think they would have been a lot of fun to hang out with. But, you're meeting people from all over the world. And coming from Houston, going to Fiji, you're running into a lot of people from New Zealand, from Australia, from Asia. Wonderful people. I mean, just some of the nicest people. But it's very hard to maintain a friendship after spending a week with them and you live literally on opposite sides of the globe. So we just really didn't have a chance to reconnect with some of them or see them again anytime soon. But I would have loved to have talked to these people to find out, why are you here? Why this particular resort? Is it just because you needed to see a beach and get away? Was there something about this particular location that really spoke to you as opposed to someplace else? I don't want to get nosy. I don't want to get into people's business. I don't do that. I don't pry. I have my own levels of privacy, as do others, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just curious about why people choose certain tropical resorts, certain tropical countries. I know some people are very into just hanging out by the pool or hanging out on the beach. Others go because they love to go diving or they love to go fishing. We have very good friends. They live in Tennessee. They're in Honduras twice a year, at least, diving. They go to the exact same place down in Roatan, and they go diving every time they're there, and that's what they do. And that's wonderful. So they know what it is about that little place they go to in Roatan, and they probably know a lot of the people there because they're always at the same place. I think that's awesome. And if you have a chance to do that, develop it, meet local people, and then it's almost like you have family that you can go and visit if you're going to go back to a place. There are a few people in Fiji that when my wife and I go back that I can look up and say, hey, it was great to see you. It's been a few years, but through the business, I was able to meet a few people down there that I could easily look up, and it would be wonderful. Chances are I'll never see them here in Houston, but I would love to go down there and see them. So I want to know your stories. I'm curious to know about what the tropics mean to you. What do they speak to you? And it's not just the aesthetics. It's not just what your particular space in your home looks like, although I would love to see that. I would love to have people share pictures of their tropical space, which could be inspiration for others. Because as I've mentioned in other shows, some people are very good with design naturally. They're very good at imagining things. They can put things down on paper. For people who are artistic, I'm so jealous because I cannot draw to save my life. For people who can do that, I think it's wonderful because then there's other people who can't. They have a hard time expressing what it is that's in their mind, or if they're not able to come up with a picture, they need good inspiration. And sometimes you might just be able to do that and help someone out by having a particular layout in your house or a particular piece of artwork or something like that. So, if there's anything that you would want to share with me, I think it would be wonderful. You can send me an email at podcast@ceruleanbay.com, and you can share your stories there. If there's any imagery that you would like me to share, I can go ahead and post that on our site, or you can go ahead and share comments to this particular podcast episode. It will be available on Apple and all the major platforms, and it's also on my YouTube channel. I have all of my audio podcasts at Tropical Escapes at Home, so you can also put your comments there. And of course, on YouTube, I would love to get your likes on there. If there's something that you watch or that you listen to that really speaks to you, go ahead and like it. And if I've earned it, go ahead and click that subscription button too, because I'm really trying to build my little community there on YouTube as well, just to really provide value to you and help people solve problems and maybe solve their design issues or whatever it is. Sometimes you just need to bounce an idea off of somebody. I'm there for that. So yeah, that is my invitation for you today. Share your inspirations. What does tropical design mean to you? What inspires you when you think of a tropical escape? What room in your house would you do if you don't already have one? Or if you do have a tropical escape at home, which one is it and why did you pick it? What does it look like? If you travel, what's your favorite place? Where do you like to go? And when you go, what do you like to do there? My wife and I, we love the quiet. We've raised our children, so we don't need to be around other people's children. When we travel, we're the 18 and older crowd. But we love the peace and quiet out by the pool. We'll go partake in cultural events. We'll go to a local town or village. We'll just go for walks in the area. We don't really get out and do all the water sport type of stuff, but we love to get out on the boat. I mean, we're not divers or fishers, but we just love being out on the boat. And when you're in a place like the South Pacific, it looks like Jurassic Park. It is absolutely beautiful. It is just stunning. I could be on the water there all day. I just love it down there. But that's what I want to know is, what do you love? What just really speaks to you and just gets you excited about the tropics? So yeah, share your inspirations, share your stories, and I'll go ahead and share those with others. I am building up our social media as well. You can find us on Facebook. I will go ahead and post about this podcast episode there, and you can feel free to comment on it as well. I would love to know what tropical escape means to you, whether it's the colors, the plants, the textures, the artwork, the memories. Maybe you have family that lives in these places. I just love knowing about the tropics and what gets people so excited about it like I do. I just love them so much. And for me, South Florida is the closest place that my wife and I can get to right now. But we do want to be able to get out there and travel and just check out some new places. I would love to go to Mauritius. I would love to go to the Seychelles. Both of these are in the Indian Ocean. I would love to go to the Maldives, which are located there too. If any of this speaks to you and you love to travel, it doesn't matter where you live. Find a place that you haven't been to in a tropical location and check it out online. Of course, you have to check out the safety of it. You've got to make sure that it's a safe place to visit. I have had a few people ask me about why I don't really write about or talk about Mexico. I won't, just because I'm living in Texas. I grew up in California, half an hour from the border. Growing up, Mexico was fine to visit. Like any other country, they had their problems down there too, but things are really out of control. And I will not recommend a place that I know is dangerous to tourists or to any other visitors. I just can't. There's too much going on in Mexico right now that means it is not a safe place to visit. So I am not going to encourage people to go by writing about it or showcasing resorts. Not at this time anyway. If things calm down and, they can get their house in order down there a little bit more, then I will go ahead and include them. But when it comes to places like the South Pacific, and obviously in the Pacific you have Hawaii, but the true South Pacific, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, places like this, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea, PNG, go to places like that, or the Seychelles, Mauritius, the Maldives. There are places in Central America which are relatively safe, and I keep tabs on this. I follow the State Department advisories, and I'm in the news all the time and reading that. There are places, check out Costa Rica. Belize, I think Belize is a very underrated place. The resorts are beautiful down there. It's off the radar. Of course, you have to be careful there like anywhere else. Every place has its crime against tourists, the petty theft and the pickpocketing and things like this. But when I talk about crime, I'm talking about violent crime, deadly crime. Bad things can happen anywhere. That, again, is why I'm not mentioning Mexico. But if you have the chance to go to a place that really speaks to you, do it. Life is so short, it goes by so fast. Or as some people would say, you get to a point where you're too old to travel. That's going to be a different definition for everybody. But why wait that long? If you have a chance, just go and then pay attention to the details. This is what I always tell people. It's very easy to get caught up in the excitement of a trip, and then things rush by and suddenly the trip is over. When you get down there, it's a vacation. Hopefully, you're not bringing work with you like too many Americans do. And, there's people on their laptops and checking their work emails and all of this. Leave all of that at home. Take a true vacation. Let these places just speak to you. Let them come alive in you. Find ways to bring as much of it home with you so that you can recreate it at home and continue to live the experience however you can. And that involves paying attention to the details, looking around, looking at the plant life, taking pictures of it, looking it up to see what it is. Can I grow it where I live? Looking at the furniture wherever you're staying. If there are pieces that really speak to you, if there's artwork or decor, take pictures of it. Try to find it online. Some hotels even have it for sale. I discovered when I was in Fiji, you could literally buy the art there. It was amazing. Look at the colors on the wall. Look at the window treatments. Look at the draperies, the blinds, whatever's in your windows. If it looks nice, make a note. If it's authentic, even better. If it's just some kind of window covering that's native to the particular area, that right there is an awesome piece of authenticity that you can bring home. And then when you're outside, it's the same thing. Just look around, make mental notes, take pictures, bring those elements home with you. There's just so much inspiration all around. If people just stop, breathe, and pay attention a little bit, you will really be surprised at how much you can notice. So, having said that, I'm hoping that you found today's show to just be insightful and just one that really sparks some imagination. I want people to get to know me better in terms of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Where did this great love for the tropics come from? Why is it that I've been so fixated on it all these years to the point where I quit my job and turned it into a business and now have a podcast about it, a YouTube channel, a blog, an online interior design course. Check us out at Tropical Design at Home. I have a link to it on our website. I'll put a link to it in the show notes here. If you find that a lot of this has really spoken to you, we have the Tropical Self-Discovery Assessment on there. It's only $29, and it will take you through a very in-depth, lengthy questionnaire to get you to think about the tropics and what it is you love about it. Look at your current living space at home, look at your current lifestyle at home, and help discern what is possible so that you can create a true tropical escape at home, one that is excellent for mental health and well-being, which then turns into physical well-being, just a place that you can go and relax, zone out, tune out the rest of the world, hopefully, if not an hour or more, then at least a few minutes. But it's just a place that visually speaks to you. If you have the right sensory elements in there, sounds in there, you just recreate that whole wonderful tropical vibe again until you can travel again or travel for your first time to the tropical place of your dreams. So with that, I just thank you so much for tuning in. I just love doing this podcast. I love doing the YouTube channel. And I just want so much to involve others and just engage others. So share your inspiration with me. I would love that. Until we meet again, have an awesome week. One that's just filled with health and happiness and a lot of tropical inspiration. I wish you guys a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.